Hi to everyone, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. I'm Andres, coming at you from Knitted Corporate Affairs in Madrid. Today, we're very happy you're joining us for the first ever episode of More Voices. More Voices is a podcast by More Agencies, a leading global network that blends the best of marketing, PR, and public affairs. I'm not here by myself today. I'm joined by my good colleague, Javier Balmaceda. Javier.
Hello, Andres, and hello, everyone, and welcome to this first episode of More Voices, where you will have the chance to listen to the top voices leading our industry in public affairs in Europe and elsewhere. We'll be covering very challenging topics like defense, tech, and the know-how and best practices in the different countries where More Agencies is present.
And yeah, like Javier said, we'll have more and more voices every episode. Get it? More voices?
Yeah, it's going to be everything about more and more and more.
And today, we're happy that we have one of the leaders and original founders of More Agencies with us, and one of the leading voices in public affairs, not just in his country, the Netherlands, but we think in Europe as well.
Thank you.
So Stefan, welcome to More Voices.
Sounds really good. Thank you for having me here, even in Madrid. Great.
No, we're loving to have you here. And just to give a bit of an introduction of Castro, which is the agency you lead, it was founded in 2019 by you, of course, and your business partner Fritz Hufnagel. Castro brings together a team with a wide range of political perspective and strong relationships across all the political spectrums, institutions, and society, both in the Netherlands and Brussels. And you know, we can make a whole introduction about Castro, but why don't you, Stefan, tell us a bit more about how you founded the company, and do tell us a little bit about the name, because it's so interesting, that story.
Yeah, and I understood the podcast is 20 minutes. It's possible for me to talk hours just about Castro, but let's keep it short. Company is named not after Fidel Castro. That was a joke in the beginning. We launched Castro in Havana, Cuba, to make people even more confused. It is named after Castro district in San Francisco, one of the most open, tolerant areas in the US, and also the basis for many of the bigger tech companies as well. Then you have my name, Stefan, the S, and Fritz, the F, SF together, and San Francisco is one of our favorite cities. And what we liked is that people were confused. We have both a background in politics for the Liberal Party, that people think, why do two liberals name their company after a communist dictator who was known for bad communications? If you then explain where the name is coming from, everyone will remember the name, and that's what happened as well. So I never got the question anymore, how is it going with your company? I forgot the name. No. Always people ask, how is it going with Castro?
Making sure you're unforgettable, right?
That was the goal.
That's great, and I think that introduction gives us a bit of how you guys are. It's actually a very cool agency, Castro, but how would you define your philosophy on public affairs in Castro?
The goal from the beginning was doing things a bit different than what we call the traditional agencies. That's also not a surprise, I think, because we started in 2019 in a situation that the Netherlands already had many public affairs agencies. That's different, by the way, in Luxembourg, where we're going to start in the upcoming months as well. They don't have a tradition of public affairs agencies. But what we saw in Netherlands is that there is a structure where the agencies do a lot of paperwork, making massive reports, just advice on the background, not transparent. And what we decided to do from the beginning is bringing people together, being the bridge between companies, business at one side, government and media at other sides, bringing it really together without a lot of massive reports, in a more casual, modern way as well, with a lot of policy events, for example, instead of just the analytical work that is important as well, and the monitoring, for example, as well, but that is not where you can be different when you compare us with other agencies.
How have you seen this, because you referred to 2019, since 2019 a lot of tech advances have happened. How have you combined that very in-person experiences like your Castro invites and your events with these new technologies, and now everything being more focused on seeing someone on the screen and just reading a report on your telephone?
Yeah, you can see it's getting more and more important. People really would like to meet other people. There was a moment in history with COVID where there was a discussion, will that ever come back? We always thought it will come back. And what we learned now with all the possibilities with, for example, AI, it's not just that you can be different when you have a good monitoring tool, for example, as well, or when you send reports what happened in a debate in Dutch Parliament, for example, because it is relatively easy these days for companies to figure out this by themselves. But you can make a difference with your network, with knowing all the politicians, with doing the policy comms, because you know the media as well, and how you can bring that message. And people, what we can see as well in the Netherlands, it also happens in Belgium, it also happens in Luxembourg. We really would like to meet more and more, great name with more agencies of course, but more than they did just in the past, I think, and there we can make a difference.
You just mentioned media, and I think sometimes people, when they understand public affairs, they sort of silo it into its own field and they separate it from communications. Yet, when looking at Castro and the way you work, you integrate corporate communications into your value proposition. How do those public affairs and corporate communications sort of work together to provide an excellent service for clients?
Yeah, for example, communications has a broad spectrum as well. So one of the more known things for everyone is just PR. A company has a good result and would like to have that in the media. Our new product, for example. That's not where the public affairs agencies make a difference. But what we believe is that for your lobbying goals, it can be really helpful if you include the policy comms as well. Why just sending a traditional email opposition paper to a politician if it's also possible to let, for example, your CEO give an interview and explain what the company is doing? That's what we call policy comms as well, using the communications for your policy lobbying goals as well. That's also a field where you maybe might think that it happens a lot with all the traditional agencies, but that's not the case in the Netherlands and in Belgium. Mostly it's a comms agency or a public affairs agency, and we are combining that also together with the field of policy events. That's another thing that we did not mention. Frits and I, the founders of Castro, are also the founders of New Bols Please in the Netherlands, which is an event agency. And together with all these event experts, we host and organize a lot of events. So for example, an inauguration last year for Meta, also a policy event, but also for example, Amazon.nl 5 years in the Netherlands last year. These kind of events also really help from a public affairs and policy perspective.
Yeah, I recommend anyone who is interested in very cool events to have a look to the website of More Bols Please, because it's really cool how you merge the space with the experience, with the message. So I'm sure that now that the inside events are very important, that you need to add something else and add some value to just sending a paper. They look super, super cool. We wanted also to use these conversations to explain a bit like how's the context in every country that takes part in the network. So let's explain briefly how the Netherlands political landscape and institutional framework is. The Netherlands is a parliamentary constitutional monarchy. The king is the head of state with a largely ceremonial role, while excluding power lies with the government led by a prime minister who is not directly elected. The system is parliamentary with a bicameral parliament, the House of Representatives, which is directly elected, and the Senate, which reviews legislation. Elections are held under proportional representation with a very low threshold, leading to a fragmented party system and coalition governments. The country is territorially organized into provinces and municipalities with significant decentralized competences. How do you make public affairs in this scenario?
It was a good summary, by the way, of the situation. We now have the unique situation. We have a king, as you described, and a prime minister. That's not unique, but they now both have a partner from Argentina. So the king is married with a woman from Argentina, and the prime minister will soon marry with a guy from Argentina as well. However, I think what was not part of the summary is that we will have later in February a minority coalition, only 66 seats out of 150, which means that always other parties in the second chamber, plus in the Senate, need to support legislation. Meaning that from a lobbying perspective, there is a lot of opportunities to be involved with several parties as well. So the government, the cabinet has to look every time for a majority, but so you can do from a company or an organizational perspective as well. What we always said at Castro is that you need to make friends before you need them actually. So this is the time, and maybe it's already a bit late, but to get involved with all of the parties that will likely support at any moment some legislation to bring the government a majority. So it's not a traditional situation what you can see in other countries. Oh, now it's right wing, so the right wing connected people have a good time and the left wing not. No, it's really a mix. So you need to have friends at all sides, and there's a lot of opportunities and risks as well to have a majority for legislation.
That's so interesting because sometimes when we think of instability, when we think of fragmentation, we think immediately of instability and what that could mean for companies, well, a more volatile context, a more volatile environment, but you see it as an opportunity to build different sort of relationships with different key stakeholders that may have influence in legislation, right?
Yeah, I think maybe that's also because I'm an optimistic person. You can also see in the newspaper a lot of analysis where people are really skeptical. But we are always trying to see things from the positive side. We don't have experience with this model in the Netherlands, so it can go wrong. However, there's many times the example, and I used to work there a lot as well, the example of Denmark that has a tradition of minority coalitions. So it's not new in Europe at all. It might work. So let's see, I hope that's the situation, because we had already several governments in the previous years. It would be good for the country if there's some stability, and also for the businesses and clients, of course, as well.
I think it's also for countries like Spain as well, but I think it's a trend in Europe, like that instability with a lot of social and political polarization. I think it was really interesting how you said that now you need to have all the doors kind of open. How do you work with the standby political actors, the ones that you don't know if they are not that powerful at the moment, but they might be in 3 or 4 years' time? So in terms of like providing certainty and a long time strategy to a company, you need to have like different plan Bs and plan Cs.
Yeah, we always have 15 or more parties, delegations in the second chamber. Actually, there is no threshold, so it's not that you need to have a minimum of 3 or 5 seats or whatever. But luckily, we currently only have one party with just 1 seat, so it's not at the maximum divided. But easily you can focus on the center, and also the parties a bit closer to the center. So for example, the Wilders party collapsed, 7 members of parliament stepped out. They will work more together with the coalition and the center parties. So I think if you focus on 10 parties, then you will be good for 99% of the legislation as well. and then, for example, Wilders can support when it comes to migration or asylum at some moments. But that's not one of the topics we are working on for some of the companies. So mostly it has to do with the economical legislation, with fiscal legislation, legislation in the field of defense, tech, etc. And there it's the center plus the right side and the left side that will define what will happen.
Let's talk a bit now about the European Union and how you deal with that. We know you have offices in Brussels, and for historical reasons the Netherlands has a deeper European culture, and you're also closer, which helps in terms of like being present in Brussels. Many times this is not only about explaining what is happening in Brussels, but how things happen in Brussels and how that institutional framework at the European level works. How do you find that in the Netherlands with your companies to integrate that EU level into the strategies, the conversations and everything? How do you approach that general understanding of the European Union?
Yeah, it's getting more and more important, and the Netherlands can be skeptical when it comes to what the EU has to do or not. The current new government will be more positive. You can see that whole tone of voice is getting more positive in the coalition agreement. Actually, Netherlands is one of the founders, one of the 6 founders of the European Union. But what we can see, and that's interesting from a lobbying perspective, is that the municipality level, plus the EU level are getting more and more important. When it comes to lobbying, many people think about national level, important as well, but more and more it is going on local and at the EU level. So for our clients in the Netherlands as well, it's interesting and crucial to see what is going on in Europe. So for them, for example, we are also organizing events, having many stakeholder meetings there as well, because almost all legislation that is coming in the national parliament is coming in one way from EU level as well. And if you wait until it's there in The Hague, it's too late. So for several of the larger companies in the Netherlands, what we can see, and then for example also the American companies we are working for, lobbying for them in the Netherlands also means a lot of focus on what is happening in the EU first. So talking with Dutch EU stakeholders, not per se the Dutch MPs, no, earlier the Dutch MEPs, or for example the Dutch Commissioner, or the civil servants from the ministries that are active in the council, for example. That's getting more and more important.
Stefan, before we go, we want to play a quick game with you, a quick fire round. We'll just throw some quick questions at you and you just say the first answer that comes to mind.
We'll do that, but I also got from my team the message, please not forget to invite the people interested in the field of defense for your event the 8th of April, for example with NATO. Bart Hollands, the innovation guy, will talk about the developments there. People are invited there. And the 21st of April we have another event in Brussels with Marco Mensink, who's the Director General of CEFIC, the chemical organization, really interested when it comes to the field of lobbying for industry, etc. So people who are interested, feel free to reach out.
And to everyone listening, make sure you follow More Agency's social media to find out more information about all these events. So we'll do the quick fire round.
Yeah.
Give us a newsletter to start the day.
When it comes to EU and lobbying, it has to be Politico, but it is also great to mention here, it's Dutch, Brussels Nieuwe, which is an amazing newsletter for what is happening from a Dutch perspective in Europe as well.
And a government or an institution that you think it's worth following at the moment for the things they're doing or the style they are using to do that?
I think NATO now is crucial what is going on there. Also interesting when it comes to that 8th of April event.
A movie, a book or a series to understand the public affairs industry?
I'm one of these guys that when it comes to books or series is also gonna watch a lot of non-fiction political related. I love the House of Dynamite, which is currently playing on Netflix. A lot to do with the political situation.
Yeah, very cool movie. And the last one is a question asking for another question. We couldn't do it with you because you are our first guest, but we wanted to leave a question for the next guest, which we still don't know who is gonna or she's gonna be. So if you can ask something interesting that the next guest will have to answer when they sit there.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult if you don't know who the guest is, so let's create a question that can work for people involved in communications and in lobbying, public affairs. How will AI influence public affairs and or communications, the reputation of companies? I think that would be a great question to answer. And then I'm not talking pure about the tools, for example, but how will it influence the more general situation?
Big question for our next guest. That's all the time we got today. Stefan, thank you very much for being here with us. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media of More Agencies, and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.